Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Deathloop. I played on the PS5, it's also available on the PC. So let's start with the story, which is fairly unique. You play as Colt, and you are stuck on an island in what you discover is a time loop. But for some reason, you can't remember anything despite the fact that previously your character can. And going forward, your character can. Which makes your character, as well as kind of your main enemy, unique in this world, because nobody else, despite the fact they all loop as well, can remember, the 24 hours that they've relived who knows how many times. But Colt wants to end the loop, and that's kind of his goal, and you've got to discover why he wants to end the loop, as well as why the others don't, and, you get some interesting character information throughout. He and Juliana really have an interesting back and forth, as well as, just getting to discover more and more about the 8 visionaries, which, it's your goal to kill them. But I do like all the little mysteries on the island. I like the world that they built on this island. I thought it was really interesting. Now let's get into the audio, and I love the voiceover work in this game. I think they did a really good job with all the different characters. I think Colt and Juliana, they're the ones you hear, I would say, the most, so theirs is the key, and they do a good job. As for the sound effects, I really enjoy the sound effects in this game. I like the way these guns sound. I like the way, there are some superpower type things going on. I like the way those sound. I like the world in general from an audio standpoint, from a sound effects standpoint. As for the music, there's not a lot of music in this game, or at least I didn't notice a lot, and what little music there is, I do think is good and fits the world. Although, admittedly, with how much time you spend going through and going back through areas, I do wish there was a little bit more music in the game. Now let's get into the gameplay mechanics and whatnot, and this is a first-person shooter, and honestly, I thought it was going to be a roguelike. It's not really a roguelike. To explain the loop, basically if you die, you start the day over again, or if you complete the 4 different sections of the day, you start the day over again. And that is the gameplay element, because what this game really is, more than some crazy wacky shooter that is also a roguelike, is an investigation game. As I mentioned, there are the 8 visionaries that you need to take out. Each day is broken up into 4 sections, and there are 4 different areas of the island. Which I gotta say, I kind of like, because each of those areas is really completely different depending on the time of day you're there. And it really makes the world feel bigger than it is, really. But the point is, you've got to figure out a way to kill these 8 guys in these 4 time segments, basically. So there's a lot of investigation of how you can get them into these certain areas. There's a lot of investigation as to just, what's going on the island, as well as, stuff that was going on before the time loop, etc. But that is not to diminish the shooting element of this game, which there is plenty, and there are some things that feel roguelike, in that you gain these things called Residium, which allow you to infuse certain weapons or abilities or upgrades to weapons that you like. And that way they will carry through to the next loop. The other interesting element is the multiplayer element, which it's not entirely multiplayer, but other players can jump in your game as Juliana and hunt you down. But only in certain missions, so it's not like every zone you go into, because there are times where you're just going in purely for investigation. You're generally safe in those situations, unless one of the visionaries is in that level area at that time. But I do think that is a fun and neat element, and even if you just want to play it single player, or if you just want your friends to be the ones jumping in, not randos, you can set the settings so it's that way. And if you set it to just purely single player, Juliana will be AI controlled and still jump in. But I gotta say, at first I was really not into the game, because I feel like a lot of the ads sold it as an FPS roguelike, and it's not. It is plain and simple that way, but once I got past that notion, I really enjoyed the game. I really like the investigation element. It's not as in-depth as it could be. It's a lot of information gathering from notes and recordings and things like that, but it is really interesting nonetheless, in my opinion. But apart from those complaints, I will say I do like in the gameplay that you can, I hate the phrase play how you want, but basically you can try and sneak about, or you can go balls to the wall if you want to, and I always enjoy that in games because, if I fail at stealth, I like to go balls to the wall. Now let's get into the controls, and I gotta say I like the controls But the one thing I'm going to harp on right away is I had issues with the double jump. You can play the game without a double jump, but there is a thing that will allow you to double jump, and I found that it didn't always work. It wasn't every single time, but there were more than a few times where I was trying to make a double jump and I would die because, you know, the double jump feature just wouldn't work. So I don't know if that was really a control thing or some kind of disconnect between gameplay, but either way, I want to mention that right away. But as for moving, shooting, aiming, you know, generally speaking, the buttons react well. The movement is good. It's very responsive. He moves in a way that you want him to move. And the aiming is good. It's not flawless, but it is very good. Now let's get into the graphics and visuals, and the first thing I'm going to say is I like the art style. But I will say graphically, there is a weird thing that happens, and maybe it's something I just don't fully notice because when you are in combat, it is really fast-paced. But like in between missions when you see Cole, it's like hyper realistic. But when you're on the mission, the other characters you see, they have a slightly cartoony element to them, not quite hyper realistic. And maybe that's aided by the Eternalists and the way they're dressed and the masks they're wearing, but that gives it a kind of cartoony vibe as well. Which I'm not against. I don't have anything against it. It's just weird seeing those one scenes where Colt looks really realistic and then others where nobody else does. But I also like the design of the world, and I think what they did there is cool because the island is broken up into 4 sections, and then each of those you can visit at 4 different times of the day, and they will look completely different. They have this weird thing going on where they might look normal at one time, but then like evening everything starts to get like crazy cold and covered in snow. As well as like you can see the Eternalists like painting the world, like literally they're painting the world. So it's an interesting thing, and it's fun to see each of the different zones at the different times so that you can see like what they've done to the world. And this area isn't ready yet, this area is, this area hasn't been painted, this area is covered in snow now. And it's just kind of neat. But I will say, I think that led to a graphical glitch that I ran into a few times where like the texture of the paint on top of a wall or some object would like flicker in and out of existence, and you know, obviously that's kind of obnoxious. It's not like game breaking, but it is something you will definitely see when a wall is like flickering in and out of being painted. But I like the bright colorful nature. I like the way the Eternalists are all dressed and they look all wacky and weird. I like the world that they are building, and I like that like each of the visionaries kind of has their own area that fits their vibe. So I gotta say, like, visually, I really do like what they've done. I like this weird, like, 60s, 70s Art Deco-ish kind of, like, crazy-ass vibes they've got going on. So to wrap this up, I've seen this game getting, like, 10s and 9s from a lot of places, and I'm not gonna go that far, but I will say I did really enjoy it once I got past the idea that it's not a pure roguelike. And I'll say I recommend it. I had a good time with this game. I really did actually enjoy it once I figured out what the game actually is. Okay, so in the comments down below, why don't you tell me what's your favorite game that was something completely different than what you were expecting it to be? And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. And if you like what I'm doing in general, share and subscribe. Have a good one.